Welcome to SEC Football Live. Stephen Godfrey, Braden Gall, and welcome to the show. Stephen, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. You tired of playoff rankings?
Real tired. Been tired for about 6 years now.
I've been tired. Lots of stuff to discuss. Tennessee and Georgia. You and I have spent a lot of time this year breaking down the Tennessee offense, the Tennessee defense, the Georgia offense, Carson Beck. We had some fun last week. I got a few messages from some folks saying that was hilarious and offensive all at the same time about our dramatic interpretation of Georgia tweets.
I didn't. Those weren't my words.
It was a dramatic interpretation, which I did. I appreciated your entire accent.
I just simply wrote them. I just simply read them. Someone else wrote those words. Yeah.
You put some stank on it though. You put some extra stank on it. But there's a lot of conversation coming out of that game because we've talked a lot about Josh Heupel's system and that type of system, not just Josh Heupel, but the offense in general and sort of Georgia's defense solving it fairly quickly. Also, Georgia's offensive line solving Tennessee's defensive line. So a lot of stuff to get to there. Florida with the big win over LSU. South Carolina and Missouri was fascinating. I'm curious about how we are going to evaluate the middle of this league at the end of the year. We're not quite there yet, but Missouri's sort of, we've long had a narrative about Missouri football. I think it's accurate, but I think it's going to be interesting to see how we evaluate Florida, LSU, South Carolina, Arkansas, sort of the middle of this conference. I think is going to be very interesting. Texas A&M and Auburn are playing a way bigger than expected football game this weekend. And you've got all these other teams sort of on the road as well. You got Texas in a matchup. You got Bama on at Oklahoma. Could easily lose that game. Ole Miss at Florida could lose that game. So a lot of stuff to get to. But before we do, ML Rose, of course, 6 locations in Nashville, Tennessee. And I found out, I got a text from somebody, an avid listener last week, Stephen. I think we talked about this. Charlotte Avenue was, in fact, the second location in Middle Tennessee.
Okay. All right. So, here we go.
We got confirmation.
I remember when it was a derelict building that it had formerly been a mechanic, like an old school mechanic. And the original building was designed to like work on old like hot rods and stuff. And so that's why if you walk into that location, there are a bunch of pieces of like old car parts that are sort of incorporated into the decor of the place, because that's what it was in that neighborhood for like 50 years or something.
And the original one on in Melrose, which is a neighborhood in South on 8th Avenue South in Nashville, was a former gay bar, actually. So just taking neighborhoods and having a good time with them. ML Rose, great place to watch football. Great drink specials from 10 until 2 every Saturday during SEC football games, or I guess big noon football games. You can watch all those games. Oh, there's a big one in the Big Ten this weekend. We might touch on that a little bit later on. There you go. There he is. There's the microphone.
Was something wrong? I didn't know anything was wrong.
Yep. So there you go. What's interesting is they have different beer in each of their locations. I'm wearing a hat right now. East Nashville Beer Works. They're a great local brewery. Shout out to those guys as well as all the other.
I thought that was an ETSU hat.
It does look like it. Right?
It does look. Pretty. Like at least on my feed, it looks pretty close to ETSU.
Timmy
Maybe
Smith,
not that second shade of blue in the outline.
Yeah. Timmy Smith not walking through that door. What's interesting is they have different beer selections in each of their neighborhoods, so they cater their location to the tastes of the neighborhood. That is what ML Rose does for you. So great drink specials, great brunch menu on Saturdays and Sundays, and their beer menu in Franklin and Gallatin and in Mount Juliet and downtown are all a little different to cater to the palates of the neighborhood. They always take good care of the neighborhood. So check out ML Rose. If you are in town and want to hang out at a really great burger spot with good prices, great local beer, and a high-quality menu, make sure you check out ML Rose. Again, on Saturdays and Sundays, pre-gaming for football and watching the early games. Fantastic place to go do so. My daughters love it. My wife loves it. I know you and the kids go all the time, so just go check out ML Rose. And yes, hello, Library Football Lady. First time catching the show live. How are you? Good to see you. If you want to comment, jump into the comment section. You can ask questions away. I don't know. I'm experiencing this because we live in Tennessee, and there's a lot of Tennessee folks who are upset about all the minutia that happens on rankings Tuesdays. Don't listen to what they say. Don't listen to what they say. It doesn't matter where the teams are ranked either. Put your head down, win your games, and then we'll see where the chips fall at the end of the season. But you shouldn't be stressed out about whether or not Texas beating Arkansas is a key win for them because they have no other wins to put on their graphic. And it's not a key win for Tennessee or a loss for Tennessee. people get so caught up in the dumbest things when it comes to this. I don't blame fans for that because this is television. As an ESPN, I say this as an ESPN employee. We've said this before. It is a reality television show ratings money grab on a Tuesday night to get you all riled up, and it works. So my advice is don't take the bait. That's my advice.
Yes. It unfortunately isn't that simple. I feel like because they own and operate every aspect of it, I do feel like a lot of fans I've talked to just feel suffocated and feel like every game is now through the prism of this one postseason entity. And I think it hasn't affected the SEC as much as the Big Ten because the SEC is flatter at the top and the Big Ten's more dynamic at the top. I don't mean that one is better than the other, which just mean that some years a conference is going to produce 2 or maybe 3 just absolutely superior teams. In the case of the SEC, it just feels like a giant jumble, like all the way through number 6, number 7. And so you parse these week-to-week silly rankings that mean nothing and are inherently biased and bad and all the things that I've said before. And, ESPN has to sort of, well, they don't actually have to is the wrong verb. They choose to do this week to week to add on that, like you said, that sort of reality television element. Bottom line is this: we don't know what the value of anyone's resume is going to be until they have 12, some 13 data points. That's it. That's what I've been saying for years.
Yep.
Unfortunately, this stuff is force fed on us. I think like the Ohio State Indiana game has really, really fallen prey to this, where everyone's just sort of putting it through that lens of, when Ohio State wins, or, what's the margin of victory that just let the game be. Let the game be.
I do love it when you get so worked up that, like, because you're not wrong about this, but you do allow it to get you very frustrated at times, more so than it should.
The ESPN part is just like exhausting. It's just exhausting.
I hear you, but you also don't have to watch it. You don't have to watch it though. Like, you don't have to watch it. Like, I don't watch it.
I view ESPN the way, like, as a member of what I think the responsible thing to do as a member of the media is that you treat ESPN the same way you would treat the Southeastern Conference, the same way you would treat the Big Ten, the same way you would treat any stakeholder in the event. And that's what they are. The problem is that they also turn around and tell you they're the media. And that's the thing that probably gets under my skin the most, is that they turn around and create these, like, we have a news department, and our news reporter on the playoff magically told us that a 3-loss team is going to make the playoff.
Okay. All right. Okay. Follow good, smart people. There are good, smart people at ESPN that just love football and report and write and talk about just the football.
They never seem to be on TV.
And well, TV is like, this. TV is about how you look and the fancy things around you and, graphics and a set that looks like a UFO. And like, that's reality television. Don't worry about that stuff. Just forget about it. The stakes though are real in a lot of these games. Like when we talk Georgia, Tennessee, or we're going to talk Auburn, and like the stakes for Auburn is, Auburn's going to be eliminated from a postseason berth, and Texas A&M, if they lose, they're eliminated from a playoff position, and maybe the SEC championship game. So there are stakes that are attached to these games. I agree with you that the conversation around Indiana, Ohio State is less about the game itself and more about what happens afterward. But sometimes that happens when you get, a huge matchup. I want to talk Tennessee and Georgia first, though, because unless you have anything else, okay, hang on. I got one more thing on the rankings, and it's not necessarily tied to the particular rankings of tonight. It is sort of a projection of where we're going to be after 12 games if things go as planned, which rarely they do in college football. But it does feel like here's my theory. I think Texas, Georgia, and Alabama are the best 3 teams in the conference, sort of like what I thought in the beginning, and that Ole Miss and Tennessee are fighting for 1 spot left in the tournament. That's how I feel about it, not because of the rankings per se, but I actually think those are teams 4 and 5 in the conference if I was doing a ranking. And I would say I think Ole Miss is a better football team than Tennessee. Based on what I've seen through 10 games, I think Ole Miss is a slightly better football team than Tennessee, and therefore I would put them into the playoff in the 4th SEC slot, whatever that might be, and that Tennessee is probably on the outside looking in. So I think it's those 2 for 1 spot. Is that a fair assumption in your mind?
I think it's flatter than that. Again, I think a lot these teams are almost interchangeable, and I think that it is coming down to really, really, really tiny, at least compared to previous years, differences in a week-to-week matchup. I think line play is basically what, like, I don't want to shrink down. I don't have anything that would differentiate my commentary on something like Tennessee, Georgia from last week, other than to say, well, that's another evidence of line play. That's another game in which line play dictated things. And as going into that situation, I felt completely confident that Tennessee was going to win, and I felt confident in my reasons why. And honestly, you could just like somehow put something over your television or filter it out or zoom in, and it would have been the line play. So when you look at those 6 teams that I keep mentioning, the line play is almost interchangeable depending on the matchup. I have a hard time saying Texas is better. I think that it really is the snake that eats its tail. It's called the Ouroboros. Like I think that Ole Miss might match up better against Texas, who might match up better against.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm doing this in real time. A&M, who might match up better against Alabama, and so on and so on and so on. And so that's a real problem for the SEC in terms of establishing a postseason resume. But that's it. That's the only real problem here. I also think that we have a bad habit of assuming that favorites are going to win out, especially over a 2-week block of college football.
Not gonna. Yeah, it's not gonna happen. It's not gonna happen.
Something in that, like Vanderbilt beating Tennessee, or Florida beating Ole Miss, or
Auburn beating Alabama. Auburn, Alabama. Come on.
Yeah, that one feels a little harder this year.
I mean,
Not impossible, a little harder,
but it's the Iron Bowl.
Harder. Yeah.
I mean, Alabama could lose to Oklahoma on the road. I'm not picking it, but it's possible.
Wow. Yeah, it is. No, I don't even know if I can finish the sentence on that one. No, I don't know. I think Oklahoma could. I think Oklahoma will be fun to watch on defense. That's as far as I can take that.
I don't disagree with you. Texas at Texas A&M, absolutely.
Now that's a toss-up. And
yeah.
In fact, I think I think if anything, what you said going all the way back to the week 0, week 1 was you felt like A&M would be better than people thought. Go in, upset Texas in that game. I think it's becoming a majority opinion.
I'm like literally doing this as you said this. I'm writing down in order 1 through 6 my offensive line rankings, and I'm doing tricky. It 1 through 6. I do think A&M and Ole Miss are at the bottom of the offensive
D-line too, though,
of the offensive line. No, I'm doing them both, and then I'm trying to put them together, right?
Right.
So I would have Texas, Alabama, Tennessee as the best offensive lines, and I would put Georgia, A&M, and Ole Miss in the bottom half.
Yeah,
on the offensive line.
Yeah,
defensive line, I think it is. This is where I think they're much more even. I think the defensive lines. I actually think Texas might be the bottom of the list, ironically, because
I think the top is inverted. I think it's. Wait.
So I had Georgia, Ole Miss, Tennessee, A&M, Alabama, and then honestly, Texas is last probably in that group.
Texas is probably last. Ole Miss might be first.
Might be. So could Georgia or Tennessee, frankly.
I would say Ole Miss, Tennessee, Georgia.
I have Georgia.
And then in that second tier, I would say, who did I leave out? A&M, Texas, and Alabama.
And Alabama's front seven is real good.
Right.
Real good. I mean, your point is that these guys are almost elite on both sides of the ball. I think
you're going to try and tell me in a little bit why, and I'm not going to disagree with you, Florida is going to have a puncher's chance against Ole Miss, right? Why it's going to be maybe a 1 or 2 possession game. And it's going to be because the success that Ole Miss had rushing the passer against Georgia does not, like, schematically, philosophically, it does not translate to how you would defend someone like Lagway.
No. The greatest weapon against the great, elite, awesome defensive line pass rush is the ability to run around.
To go away from it.
To run fast.
To leave.
Big man run fast is what DJ Lagway does. But I think your point about like separating the defensive and offensive lines from the rest of and I would argue this is what makes the conference just quarterback play as well. But quarterback play packaged with line of scrimmage play. And I have an old adage. I don't know about you because I've worked for Athlon since 2007. And the 3 areas I always start my analysis with, and it used to be a lot easier before the portal and roster management issues, but I always start my analysis with what I consider the 3 most important places in a team, which is the line of scrimmage, the quarterback, and the head coach. If you have stability and talent at those 3 spots, you can probably find answers to other problems. whether that's linebacker, whether that's running back, whether that's receiver. If you are great along the line of scrimmage at quarterback, the guy who makes the decisions and the guy who prepares the entire team, the head coach, you probably are going to be a pretty good football team. And then from there, it's like, oh, who has the better pieces? Well, Georgia doesn't have the receivers, right? Well, Tennessee doesn't have the receivers, right? Ole Miss does have a receiver who's a superstar, has a coach who knows how to scheme him up. You look at Texas and you go, man, the weapons and the scheme. Maybe the quarterback's the question in big time situations. Quinn Ewers, I don't know, maybe not. But you can kind of go down, like Texas A&M, same thing. You can go down the list, and I think that's what makes a great team when you are predicting them in the preseason. And I think a lot of these 6 teams have held true to that. And frankly, I think 5 of them are amongst the 10 best teams in the country. I don't think A&M's there yet.
I don't agree with that, but I do think that there's a mash together. I think that eventually they're going to have to suss themselves out. And the fact that these teams aren't playing each other is not the fault of the rest of the nation. I think you're creating a product. It's almost homogenous now. The fact, I mean, you just said like, hey, the D lines are all the degree of variance is very small. Some have dynamic O lines. Some might have a receiver answer. Some might. Look, I feel like 6 months after the season ends, people we're just going to go, oh, yeah, no one had a Heisman quarterback this year in this league. No one was like dramatically world-beating different at quarterback. They're good quarterbacks.
You know who I think does? Alabama.
Yeah, but they're also.
I think Milroe's the best. Too. I think Milroe's the best of all of them, though. If you're asking me about the quarterbacks, I think Milroe is the best of the SEC quarterbacks. I think Dart's number 2, probably. I might have Beck number 3. But again, if we're doing this ranking list here, Nico's not at the top of the list. Neither is anybody playing for Texas A&M. And then I probably have Ewers above that. And then I would probably, at the top of the list, it would be Milroe 1, Dart 2, I think, with a bullet. I would feel pretty comfortable with those 2. I think it's – see, you think it's flatter than I do. I think Texas A&M and Tennessee are 5 and 6. I think they are clearly 5 and 6 on this list, in my opinion. I think Ole Miss is – you cannot – it's hard to argue that Ole Miss is not better than Tennessee. It's hard to argue. And I'm not basing it on like –
This week, I mean, next week, Ole Miss could lose by 7 in the swamp, and we won't say that.
And Ole Miss's loss of all these teams might be the worst of all of them at home to a bad team.
That's inarguable.
Yeah. So let's go Tennessee, Georgia here for a second, because I want to know what should we be taking. And I know when we evaluate coaches and teams, we do it on the 12 data points, right? We want the entire season to sort of look at an entire body of work and say, right, this is what we learned about this coach or this player or this scheme. Here's what did work. Here's what didn't work. And then we project it forward to sort of the next season or the next round of players. But I do think inside this Georgia-Tennessee thing, there's another story, which is the Heupel offense going up against players that are just better than it. That has nothing to do with how poorly they pressured Carson Beck. That's a totally different conversation. But on Tennessee's offense, which here are the numbers. 5 times last year, Tennessee averaged over 6 yards a play on offense. They have not hit over 5.8 yards per play in any SEC game this year. And for the 3rd straight year, they're going to go down in points per game. The offense is the problem. And Georgia's defense is great. Incredible environment in Athens. Full stop. But the narrative around the Heupel offense has always been you will line up and beat everybody when you have better players because the system, you don't need a second, you don't need like a breaking ball, right? You can just throw fastballs. And they're going to win.
Yeah.
But when they have a Georgia problem, number 1. But number 2 is Georgia ate that quarterback and that offensive line alive, and that has not been a problem for Tennessee all year. And when they get into those situations, they get tight. Heupel goes away from the running game. I'm just curious, do you think there's a larger takeaway from Tennessee's offense not being able to produce once again against a team with equal or slightly better than talent? They have not figured out a way to make that offense work against the best of the best.
They beat Alabama.
It can happen every now and then in a home situation.
Like, why do we have to deal in absolutes? That's the whole. I think that's the whole situation here.
Well, you know that I don't mean it like every single time. I mean, it's never won a championship at any school, like at the national championship level, where you it's never. That's been the narrative around it, at least.
I mean, and we're getting semantic there because there's elements of this offense that were in Urban Meyer's Ohio State offense. There's elements of this offense that Lane Kiffin brought to Alabama. I wouldn't go down that path because a lot of really smart people, smarter than us in the scheme world, have said like, Well, Tennessee's kind of a power run team. I mean, like, they're not this
They are
gimmicky UCF, some, like, again, I always say it's not a pejorative. It's not a bad word. So
right.
it's just kind of funny.
And honestly, that's my question.
I don't know. I don't know.
Is this a sign of more of that, or is this just, hey, Georgia played a great game? Nico's not quite there yet because he's still inexperienced, and Georgia's defensive line is really good.
It's line play. I mean, that's it. I don't think it wasn't an oversimplified offense. It wasn't a schematic failure. In a game like this one, no. I mean, it's line play. I mean, like, the simplest thing, like, it's Occam's razor this year. Okay. You don't have a dynamic difference. These Heisman players and all this kind of stuff, especially at quarterback. And so I do think week to week, it's getting to where it feels a little bit like a coin flip when it comes to how you're scheming up inside. It's not a sexy answer. It's the only through line that I can find that explains Tennessee's Alabama result, Tennessee's Georgia result, Georgia's Ole Miss result. Like, we can keep doing. That's the only thing that I could see that would carry true through all those different matchups. And like Tennessee, Georgia too.
I mean,
Texas, Georgia.
I was going to say Alabama, Georgia, and Texas, Georgia all apply.
Texas, Georgia. So yeah, so
all of that as well. And I think that's going to happen with Texas and A&M 2 weeks from now as well. I think you can put that one into that group as well. It's whichever one gets the most pressure and dominates. Here, the other side of the ball is far easier for me to analyze, which is Tennessee's weakest area of their entire team is their secondary, and they have not played a pro-style offense. And when you do not pressure that man, it almost does not matter who you're playing against. If he stands back, and this is where the Georgia reductive offense, I think, benefited them. And that's what my theory was last week, which is they're the two similar of teams. And I think the pro-style offense really threw them off in general. Like, tight ends running down seams, they have not faced that all year. Tennessee has not faced an offense where a quarterback stood in the pocket. And frankly, Carson Beck played his best game. But, like, I think
he had some clean looks too, man.
Dude, the whole game. Here's the thing: 11 passes of more than 15 yards or more by Georgia, 1 for Tennessee. That's it, right there.
Like, Carson Beck didn't have to make a lot of hard decisions and had time. I think in a lot of those bigger spots. Like, that's team win stuff that you talk about in the locker room. I think that is underplayed. But again, it's line play. It's that simple. This is why I find it hard to, say it's these two teams or these three teams or what have you, where it is going. Yeah, where we're going to have the bigger problem is then, and where I guess I have a little bit of sympathy for these teams is if it does go chalk, arguing one against the other is going to drive everyone insane.
Well, it's because
someone's going to be left out.
Well, it's because they've all beaten each other in the Ouroboros of what you're talking about. So is your theory that it's the consistency of the line play that's not in question, like it's bad, but like, Ole Miss clearly, I mean, Ole Miss's defensive line and Tennessee's defensive line are not as different as their performance against Georgia would indicate, right? I mean, I would say Ole Miss is better, but the gap in between performance and actual reality of those two units, the Tennessee defensive line and the Ole Miss defensive line are two of the best in the country. Ole Miss is better. But the way Ole Miss played and completely dominated, now home and road is a factor here, but Ole Miss completely dominated that game against Georgia's offensive line, and Tennessee did nothing. Is it about consistency of that line play that you're talking about?
I think it has to do with with matchup. We've talked in previous shows. I'm sort of working on this theory that even amongst talented offensive lines, there's an inconsistency because most of these guys are thrown together and they don't have the repetition and the ease of like, hey, we spent 4 years in this system. So I do think it leads to inconsistency throughout the course of a season. I'm curious about I do think there's an overinvestment in road games. We are like, two things can't be true in the SEC. You can't constantly talk about the advantage of a home environment and then also not acknowledge that all of these teams are facing these home environments half the time. In other words, that they're like, you get inoculated to it. Look, I saw a rollicking, amazing home environment when Vanderbilt upset Alabama. I don't think that was the problem with Alabama that night. The idea that, and by the way,
sold out Vanderbilt crowd, all 10,000 seats full.
All right, I'll tell you, Oxford. Okay, Oxford. People had that game circled forever, for over a year, for as long as it's been on the schedule. Maybe not over a year then. But to Georgia, is that how much of a factor to overcome is that for a Georgia team who has a bigger stadium and routinely plays in front of bigger and louder crowds? It's just not. I don't buy that. I don't buy that. The idea of the home environment hurting Tennessee last week. I think it was entirely all between the lines, because
I agree.
Tennessee, massive advantage home environment against, who did I just say? Alabama, when they beat this is where I think that becomes moot.
Alabama took the best home environment you could possibly play in and just sat on it. They went to Baton Rouge and just obliterated that home environment. Sent them home.
Which I've always said is not is if you've been to, I'm going to say this because I know what I'm talking about here. If you've been to Baton Rouge in the last 10 years or 5 years, it is getting nicer and it's getting worse. And what I mean by that is I like the dirty blackened alligator under the railroad track. I was reading a book right now about how the English Premiership basically cribbed a bunch of things from the NFL to become the world's largest sporting entity. And a lot of people in the SEC tend to look over there for inspiration on things. Greg Sankey.
The Premier League.
But it's funny because this happens in every sport. The facilities are terrible. The environment's terrible. But in the case of something like Tiger Stadium, where you're still packing in an extra 10,000, all the myth around Tiger Stadium, I'm just going to be totally honest with you, all the myth around Tiger Stadium, it involves a place that doesn't exist anymore. When you're in the upper deck of Tiger Stadium, they have a separate luxury section, an indoor buffet. They have luxury suites that are tiered out. I'm just telling you, they kind of neutered the place, and that's the advancement of money. And it's not just Tiger Stadium. Well, no, everyone talks about Tiger Stadium at night, and I'm like, it's fine now.
Well, okay, now you're off. Now you're off on a tangent. I was just saying, as an example of a good team that deals with a hostile environment all the time, going on the road and just neutering a good fan base. Alabama doing that. I mean, LSU did it to South Carolina early in the year. They went. I do think that the road home thing, I think, is a little overvalued to some degree. I will say Neyland Stadium is similar in that the facade is getting nicer and some of the luxury stuff is getting nicer, but it's still shit ass urinals on the first floor down by where all the expensive tickets are still. So it's it's still not a nice place to be in the concourse. I think it's not even a concourse. Right?
The thing that helps Neyland the most is it was overbuilt in the stadium size wars that kind of stopped in the early 2000s because of economic issues and also because of a shift in priorities. But it's steep because it was overbuilt. It was bowled in faster than most stadiums, and it's incredibly steep in the upper deck, which it sucks for the human beings spending time up there. But when it's packed and sold out, it's the noise sits on top of you and it creates a reverberation. But if you're an Alabama player, you've heard it before.
Yeah, I am not very snobby about my sports very often, but when I take my daughters to Neyland Stadium, we do not sit in the upper deck.
I'm going to be honest with you.
I will pay the money to sit in the good seats at Neyland Stadium.
Maybe I'm contradicting myself like everything I just said. But my kids have been like, "Hey, please take us to a college game." I was like, "I ain't taking you to Vanderbilt until it's done." Fair. Because I took them to a preseason Titans game and I take them to a Falcons game every year. And the difference when you are a parent and it's food options and bathrooms and lines and congestions and crowds, there's no comparison.
Mercedes-Benz Stadium is there's luxury lounges where you can still see the game and have a beer. It's not even close.
You want those amenities and luxuries. Dude, if you're an LSU fan listening to this and you have kids, you're like, hell yeah, Tiger Stadium's nicer. I can bring my family. So it works both ways, and I do acknowledge that.
Well, and I've been a season ticket holder for Nashville SC for every year they've been, even in the USL, which is the Nashville SC it's the MLS team here in town. Then it's the largest soccer specific stadium in North America, and it is a beautiful park, Geodis Park. But the amenities, the family bathrooms and the stairs and the chairs and the sight lines and all this stuff is great for my kids.
I'm going to confess something. If Steve Cavendish is listening, he's going to yell at me. Both of my kids have now been, two of my three kids who are old enough to go to games, they've been to a game. I still have not been to an SC game. I feel bad.
Whoa. Seriously?
Yeah. I have not been to the stadium
What?
or the park, the Shed Park.
Okay, I have 4 season tickets. I will give them to
You gotta
you,
holler at me, dude.
and you can leave the one of the children at home.
Well, guess what? Anyone who's listening who has more than 2 kids, they know that you always know which one you're leaving.
Dude, a table for 5 is so much harder to get than a table for 4. It's why we didn't have a third child. So
please imagine going to hotels, theme parks, airports, and everything else, and you have to account for 5.
It's so awkward. It changes the car you drive and the house you live. It changes everything. It's
Catholicism. Buyer beware.
Hey, look. Anyway, we'll check the home road. We'll check the home road splits at the end of the year. It's not as daunting as it used to be. But it is hard to play on the road against loud noise. It doesn't mean you're not accustomed to it, but it does change the way you operate. That had nothing to do with why Tennessee lost the game, though. But no, here's the other one, and I just want to say this. I don't want to belabor the point. The officials had nothing to do with it. Okay? The calls are 50-50.
No.
The calls are 50-50. People are like, I don't see a face mask, but if you grab somebody around the side of the helmet and they call a face mask penalty, you got to deal with that when you grab somebody by the side of the helmet. The fumbles on the tight end pass over the middle, it was 50-50. If they would have called it a fumble, I would have been fine with it. Ruling on the field wasn't. It wasn't. Sometimes human error is a part of the game. It's 50-50. You got to deal with it. You didn't lose the game because of the officials. Stop making excuses for your football team, Tennessee fans. I love you, but you scored 10 points. You scored 10 points and it didn't do anything the rest of the game. For 3 quarters, you got your ass kicked. That's why you lost the game.
I have no problem. I have a huge problem when fans try to whip this up into like the local sports talk radio kind of narrative. But
it's happening in Nashville so bad because the Titans are getting the same treatment. So bad.
I'm cracking up because I loved when the Utah idea was like, hey, just want to walk out here and say we got screwed. Those refs suck. I love that. I was all over that. I was like, bars.
He's like, I don't know why we joined the Big 12. Like, okay, dude.
You know why he said that? Do you know why he said that? Is because they fired that ref in the Pac-12. He got fired from his Pac-12 officiating job and then got a job in the Big 12. And Utah shows up and they're like, this guy, like.
Well, and the Pac-12 officiating.
That was hilarious.
Pac-12 officiating was not good the last few years of that conference.
It was creative.
All right, I'm gonna ask you a question. Alabama at Oklahoma, A&M at Auburn, and Ole Miss at Florida. Most likely to lose on the road as an upset. Ole Miss, really not A&M.
No.
Okay, Vegas totally disagrees with you, but
I know.
Do with that what you will. Is it purely because of Florida playing hard for Billy Napier and DJ Lagway being a very difficult mark?
It's all the latter. I don't buy the former. I think it's a matchup issue for Ole Miss. I don't think that it translates the way that that people think in terms of like, well, they beat Georgia so bad or they did this against Georgia. It doesn't work that way. Look, you want to talk about mitigating factors or like, this is a sleepy game. It's a sleepy game. You're coming off of a bye.
Early kick.
Coming off of a bye, a huge win at home, and you're already and your head coach is out talking about how he doesn't want to go to the SEC championship. I love that. And then I wrote a whole column for it at the Washington Post. Why is this guy talking about it right now? Like, say
the quiet part out loud. Say it.
Or maybe like worry about that when you actually qualify for the. You still have 2 conference games to go, my guy. Like,
that's true.
I thought that was sort of stupefying. And then kickoff time, as you mentioned, right? And take this for what you can laugh at me if you want to. They haven't won there since 2008.
How many times have they played?
At least once, if not twice more. Like, they don't beat Florida with consistency or regularity. And when you do, and Tennessee fans can kind of know what I'm saying here. Like, I think it's similar kind of like anxiety brain rot between those 2 fan bases where you just feel like it's like an imposter syndrome thing. It's not a given. I think it's going to be a closer game than people think. And
I agree.
Who have they seen like Lagway this year?
Kalen Green, maybe.
I mean, if you want to,
they dominated Arkansas. He played in that game, right? I'm trying to. I know. That's a good question. I'm trying to think of it. I mean, Vandergrift, no. No.
Nussmeier was
Nussmeier's the opposite. Yeah.
But I know, but he was. I think that was maybe before they adjusted to whatever the problem was to become the pass rush they had paid the money for, because the stretch drives where LSU creeps back in and creeps back in and creeps back into that game, fairly clean pocket, very aggressive, throwing down the field. That doesn't happen if the pass rush is disruptive.
Yeah.
And I think that was the one. I think that's the one that probably pissed them off, and from a film perspective, more than Kentucky, which was, again, sleepiness, 11 a.m. game, and kind of a fluke ending. Like
so Oklahoma's going to try to get to bowl eligibility. Auburn is at 4-6. They've got to win to stay with a chance to get bowl eligible. Then they have to beat Bama. It's not going to happen.
Yeah,
but A&M, if A&M loses, they are probably out. They're out of the playoff at that point. Florida at 5-5 is trying to get to bowl eligible. Now, I did say at the beginning of the summer, and many people, including Old Takes Exposed or Freezing Cold Takes or whatever the account is now on the artist formerly known as Twitter. There's a video of me. I went on another show and I was like, I think Billy Napier's closer to a contract extension than getting fired, which is a little tongue in cheek. But it turns out
right.
It turns out I'm damn right. And I said they were going to either beat LSU or Ole Miss at the end of the year at home, and I'm right about that too. Not to say that we're right about everything, but I wouldn't be surprised if they win this game, and that they can probably beat Florida State and get to a bowl, in which case Napier's coming back, boys. And now they've already said that, but like it might actually be worth it because they're playing hard for him still, as we alluded to last week on the show.
You should take a victory lap on that. You did win on a technicality, but you won.
it's absolutely a technicality. Yeah. Arkansas, they need to win over La Tech to get to a bowl, which I think is Sam Pittman retire? I've heard retirement rumors about Sam Pittman. How about that?
I will. Okay, so the fastest way to explain this is like
these are my eyes looking sideways.
No, there's no tongue in cheek here. I'm gonna be totally honest. He has a clause not dissimilar to the Mark Stoops language of his original Kentucky contract, which doesn't exist now. That if I believe it's bowl or winning season, I'm not sure what the language is, then I think he bumps to a 1-year extension. Now, granted, his deal is not as rich as that Stoops deal that just kind of kept him in perpetuity in Lexington. But guys, you just said it. They're going to beat La Tech. And I kind of like, I mean, I don't know if I like them outright against Missouri, but that's going to be a game, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, without a doubt. I like Missouri's fraudulent to me. So what's interesting to me is like, no, he's retirement. Hell, I would he's back next year, I think.
Yeah.
Now,
no, I agree.
Or sorry, I shouldn't say firing. I'm sorry. Now, retirement, I could see. Retirement to me is like
different.
Let me walk this out in 30 seconds. I'll try to in 30 seconds. You come in, you inherit the Chadness of it all, right? Okay. I said this on the show that I had 2 SEC assistants one year say that's the least talented SEC roster I've ever seen in my career.
I think
they were not young. They were not young guys. Okay. You fix it. Essentially, you fixed it. You fixed it, right? You fixed it. Okay. You're competitive again. You win games. You beat Tennessee this year.
Good coaching staff he's built.
Yeah. Your DC, I really think, is a coach in waiting, personally.
I agree.
Not your OC, your DC.
I think it's a great like 2 lieutenants.
You can talk me into this, Braden.
For Sam Pittman.
Yeah. The other thing is this. He's loved up there. I think he's the guy you corner office the way, like Spurrier technically has a job at Florida. I think that's what he does. He's like an emissary for them.
A job.
But he's involved.
He's out there campaigning for gun right activists and common sense gun law, which I appreciate from all the people in the world. Steve Spurrier. Love that.
I think it really is more of a I can talk myself into this. I don't think it's going to happen, but I could definitely talk myself into Pittman, especially this year, Braden. He was dead to rights hot seat. Him and Napier were leading the hot seat in the nation. Maybe Aranda, maybe somebody like that was a little hot. I'm talking about if you go back and put yourself in the mentality of like August 20th.
Yeah. All of them have saved their jobs.
Yeah, kind of.
All of them. Aranda's still Baylor.
Florida's a technicality.
I know, but Aranda still has a chance to. It's albeit extremely small, but Baylor is still technically alive for a spot in the Big 12 championship game.
Jesus,
so there are 9 teams still eligible for that tournament.
Football coaches don't listen to what I'm about to say, but if you don't have a massive ego, why wouldn't you take a step and say, right now, my Q rating has never been higher. I could retire and get paid and be a legend here. and be loved, and then let me hand this headache off.
So that to
I would
me,
do it.
I don't see legend status yet for Pittman. That is
I'm sorry.
theory.
Not Frank Broyles. No.
But that is my theory of the Mark Stoops case all along.
I can explain Mark Stoops in a much more
I know
and inappropriate way.
There's tension there, but like the point is that he would have a statue if he walked away right now.
Mark Stoops is not leaving anywhere unless you pay him to leave anywhere.
I know. Or if Kurt Ferentz retires.
Correct. Yeah.
Kentucky at Texas, 3-touchdown favorite. Hook 'em there.
Thank you.
Here's a theory I have on this. I had Mississippi State 0-8. You know how 0-8 teams or teams that are like that, first year coaches, they build to the end of the year and then they get somebody. For some reason, I have an instinct about this game for Missouri. For some reason.
Yes, I don't.
Mississippi State is not good, but a 7-point favorite at home. Could Mississippi State jump up and get one? It's not going to be Ole Miss next week. It could be this one.
It's in Starkville, right?
It is.
Okay. All right. Okay. Noted.
Remember I said I thought Toledo was going to go down there and win outright. I've had my finger on the Starkville pulse all year, Steven.
What pulse? Could you find it? But you found a pulse?
I think there's one this weekend. I think that they are going to, I think there's one this weekend.
Who's their starting quarterback?
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Here's a question about all these teams. And then Vandy LSU is actually super interesting to me. Down in Baton Rouge, 7-point favorite.
Hey,
I like Vandy to play well in that game.
What about the quit theory?
I like it. I like Vanderbilt to play very well in that game.
What about the emerging concept? You want to talk about college football traditionalists getting mad? What about the emergence of the quit theory? I'm serious. It happened at A&M last year. And they're not as NIL laden as A&M is. But BK, if you haven't noticed, not the nicest guy to play for. Not the warmest of environments.
I thought he went through a personal reclamation project at Notre Dame and became a softer, gentler Brian Kelly years ago.
Constituents. So, Vanderbilt's going to come in just piss and vinegar.
Can you imagine Vanderbilt's season at the end of it, putting a list of accomplishments together and saying you won the state of Alabama on the road at Auburn and Alabama at home. You almost beat Texas. You have a chance to knock off Tennessee and eliminate them from a playoff spot at home next week, and you went to Baton Rouge and won. They're both 6-4. Vanderbilt has better wins than LSU.
It seems like
this is nuts.
It does seem like too far afield to say they'd win out, but it doesn't seem crazy at all now to say they'd win one.
So
who's catching it?
I think they play well this weekend. Tennessee's beatable. Tennessee's very beatable.
That game's in Nashville.
The game's in Nashville, in front of 9,000 screaming cancer doctors and civil rights lawyers.
Yeah, and 38,000 sidewalk fans.
Yeah.
Isn't it going to rain? I think it's going to rain too.
Is it really supposed to rain this weekend?
It's like early. I thought the early forecast was right now. That could change or whatever. I would hate for that just because it would seem like extra miserable in the construction stadium.
Quickly, the other games, Bama, Oklahoma. I agree. I think of the ones I asked you about, I think Bama's the least likely to lose. I don't think Oklahoma challenges them offensively much. And so I think Bama's defense travels. I think they go up there and win.
Watch
A&M and Auburn.
Hang on. Watch for Venables. I'm curious what Venables shows and what he does. It's almost like a favor to other teams that might have to play Alabama. Venables has a pretty good history against Alabama. And I know it was Saban's Alabama. I am genuinely curious what the Kalen DeBoer, Nick Sheridan, and then Brent Venables, like what that call and response looks like. The other side of the ball is just so insanely, stupidly lopsided that it doesn't matter. That's why it's not a game.
Okay.
But I'm just saying, no, if you're trying to predict, if you're predicting the fortunes of Alabama, I would be curious. Like I'll put it this way. Their opponent in the first round or, whatever it is in the playoff, they're going to be watching that Oklahoma tape. I have a feeling.
Okay, I see what you're saying. So defensive coaches are going to be keeping an eye on how Venables.
Yeah. I think because
Jalen Milroe.
Yeah, dude. Think about how many. I agree with that. Yeah, postseason games Venables is coached in. Like he knows what. Yeah.
I know. I see what you're saying. I know what you're going there. A&M Auburn. I want a quick analysis on like why you're so not sold on Auburn.
On Auburn.
Auburn. 2.5 point spread is fishy, man. Fishy. Vegas is telling you to take
Vegas
A&M.
is not always right.
No, but when they do these weird things, they generally get them right, which is they put the line way down there low because they want you to gamble on Texas A&M. They want you to come in hard on A&M. That's why that number is. That's why that I'm just tracking the strategy here. They want you to hammer A&M.
Then hit the money line. I can't conjure this up as something it isn't.
Auburn loses, they will not go to a bowl this year. What is that? So here's what I want to get to. Evaluating the middle class in this conference. Auburn is 4-5, and they lose to Bama 4-8 potentially. What is that is not improvement.
He's coming back. I mean, he's coming back. He's coming back. Everything I've told was that he's coming back. They did fine. They handled ULM last week, but ULM's not a terrible team. They're just a mid team. He's 110% sort of selling the vision right now on the high school recruiting. They're going to have to shop for a quarterback in a way that I guess I don't know if this is a Dabo thing with him or not. And this is, I guess, an off-season topic, but he's got them sold on what he's doing in high school recruiting. It's just the portal is it's not something you can ignore. It's like 3 legs of or 4 legs on it, whatever. Like you're gonna fall if you don't have that leg to you, if you will, especially as a team that's trying to transition. Let me stop myself or I'm gonna rant. You need to be in the business of getting to 8 next year. Auburn as a fan base is in the business of expecting 11.
If you win this game and then you lose to Bama, it's not a good taste. But
You're
5-7 feels a lot better than 4-8.
And what was he last year?
5-7, I think.
Right. Okay.
We should know this.
Well, it's because they lost to New Mexico State at the end. I think that knocked him out of bowl eligibility, if I recall.
Quarterback by
some young man a couple miles from here.
Yes.
This is, I mean, I kicked the tires. I'm not being coy. I kicked the tires on the contract situation because he doesn't have a time buyout. So there's no calendar clause, meaning like when Jimbo was owed that ungodly amount of money, they also had to come up with $19 million within 30 days.
They were 6-7. How could I forget they played here in Nashville? And remember that was the whole I didn't call we got boat raced by Maryland because I didn't call any of I wasn't paying any attention to the bowl game. All I did was recruit.
That's right. I'm too busy blaming someone else as usual.
Exactly.
Yeah, they did go to a bowl. Yeah. So 5-7.
No, they were 6-6. They lost to Maryland in the Music City Bowl.
No, I'm saying 5-7 this year. I don't think it. Look, if you're an Auburn fan and you still believe in Hugh Freeze, I don't think you give a rat's ass about going to a 6-6 bowl game, a Memphis, Nashville, Tampa, whatever it is. I'm not trying to offend the Music City Bowl. I'm just saying it's anybody.
Trip to Nashville's nice. So
what? No,
Shreveport, Louisiana.
No, I'm not. What I'm saying is, if you're an Auburn fan right now, your standards are so high and your patience is so thin. I think it's much, much more like, hey, Hugh, like, how are we winning 10 next year? And so it's not like the bowl's going to buy you anything.
All right. I want you to go sort of rapid fire here, and assuming these teams kind of finish where they are, like we've seen enough data to sort of know what Missouri is and kind of know what Kentucky is and kind of know what Florida is and kind of know what LSU is. And certainly one of these teams could win 2 or lose 2 and wheels fall off or they surge or whatever. But I'm just saying, like, how do we South Carolina is going to win and go to 8-3. Let's say Missouri wins and they go to 8-3. There's a good chance that both those teams could get to 9 wins. Missouri, for example, 20 wins in over a 2-year period of time in the modern SEC is very, very impressive. How do you evaluate Missouri? South Carolina, clearly one of the best seasons under Shane Beamer. How do you evaluate them? LSU, major step back this year for Brian Kelly. I know you're not a BK fan, but like, I'm just curious. Florida, probably.
Do you think it was major?
I think that's a fair question. I
think they over-indexed in the preview season, honestly.
So here's my I was the lowest on LSU of any of the top 8 or 9 teams in the conference in the preseason. So I did not expect them to finish in the top 6. I think I wrote them down at 8. I think at media days. I think they were over-indexed in the preseason. I don't think they over-indexed last year or the year before because they lost 4 games in his first season, and they just happened to win against Bama, and that took them to Atlanta. And Bama was the better team that year.
They got smoked in Bama.
The defensive problems last year, while covered widely, were sort of not the thing people cared about. They cared about the Heisman Trophy winner and the quarterback doing spectacular things, and 2 10-win seasons is still a pretty good start. I think this is a step back naturally, but that the coach fixing the defensive staff in particular should have done a better job. I think this is the first year where I go, I don't think Brian Kelly did as good a job as he should have. I thought he did a pretty good job the first 2 years.
Are you blaming the new defensive coordinator, or this isn't a trick?
So I think to your point about Auburn recruiting and what Hugh Freeze is selling people. Brian Kelly tried to fix some issues in the portal the first year, tried to fix some issues in the portal the second year, and then totally refocused on recruiting and did a great job in state last year. That takes time, though, if you want to start competing with the Texases and Georgias and Alabamas. So I don't actually know what to expect. I know that at the end of 3 years to have 4 losses, 3 losses, 4 losses, not necessarily what LSU fans signed up for. But I also don't think it's too soon to make any rash decisions, in my opinion.
Okay.
I know you don't like the hire or the coach, so you're fine with
I just don't think it pays dividends long term. But I'm going to be honest. Let's take some subjectivity out of it. If you put a blind item up on LSU's roughly what their deficiencies going into this season, what they didn't have, and I would say they haven't corrected on defense enough.
No, but I like the staff.
I like the staff I like the whole staff. He's always done this. He's like, this is what he did at Notre Dame. He had a ton of great assistants. Look, this is so hard and complicated sometimes because we don't know how to tolerate this 12-team thing where it's like, you didn't even get us to the playoff. Like, that's going to be the sentiment. But would you also walk away from him? Well, they're not gonna, by the way, the buyout's huge. But he's
here's
not
the thing.
hot seated next year.
No. Unless he loses out. If they lose to Vandy and lose to Oklahoma and they finish 6-6, then we have a different conversation.
I mean, financially, I would say there's still, that's so much to eat right now with the house settlement coming. I mean, I was talking to somebody today about some of those details, and I wouldn't sign up for any financial liability right now. Because remember, you don't just pay the buyout. You also have to pay the next staff. And those assistants have separate buyouts now. So you're stuck with them next year. I think you have to kind of put the emphasis on the defense, in my opinion, because Nuss overperformed. That was my expectation, though. So no, they're not going to be satisfied.
I think he did what I expected, which is better than people think, but not elite.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. I didn't think he'd be as good as he is. I didn't.
I liked him over Wigman in the preseason. But not to go back.
Yeah, that.
All right, Vander. So
paid off.
LSU, very interesting. The last 2 weeks from an off-season narrative conversation around the coach. Isn't Missouri and South Carolina with Beamer and Eli? Aren't those just totally house money seasons? I don't think that's just evaluating what they accomplished this year should be positive, right? Even if Missouri's not as good as they were last year.
There will be gripes inside of Missouri because I think he set them up for the playoff run expectation and he failed to reach that, so that's on him. I think they got a horseshoe jammed up their butt for most of this year. I think of all the teams with these records we're talking about, that's clearly the worst. And his representation, however you want to say this, they were riding the hot hand in the early Florida talks, and that's something to kind of quietly pay attention to now. I'm not saying you damn the man for having aspiration, but obviously interesting to see how these things pan out. So
especially when you go around your athletic director to get a contract extension, but that's neither here nor there. Florida, Billy Napier, we kind of talked about him. Kentucky is an interesting one. They're going to lose this week to go to 4-7 if they can beat Louisville, which is, they've done a good job against Louisville, but man, I don't know. Kentucky's if they end up 4-8, that's a really interesting season for Kentucky and Mark Stoops. So
same situation I mentioned with Brian Kelly, different dynamic in terms of it's sort of the unmovable object in terms of the staff. There are people that Kentucky would go out and hire tomorrow, and the things they want to do. But you've already made the Iowa joke, so I don't have to do it. I don't think anything's changing there. Sorry.
Two Iowa jokes in one SEC podcast is too many jokes.
Too many Iowa references.
I mean, and then ultimately there's like, it's just I just find it to be a fascinating, there's a chance that all 16 coaches are coming back, which I find to be just fascinating in general. That's just interesting.
It doesn't seem possible because it never happens. Even this time of year when we say it might, it never happens.
I think next year you could have like 6 openings.
South Carolina, would be a record. I'm going to mess these numbers up, but in the middle of a worldwide pandemic, the likes of which we hadn't seen in anyone's lifetime, South Carolina came out and said, I wrote a story about this at the time, so the correct numbers are somewhere, but I believe it was between $50 and $60 million in a deficit. They're like, we're going to have to furlough people. We're going to have to find a way to make this money up. We don't know what the future holds. World Muschamp, you're still fired. $16 million fired. Someone.
He agreed to a lump sum. He agreed to a lump sum payment of just 12.
15. Yeah, 12. Oh, okay. Well, what a bargain! What a bargain! Which is why he sat around the Georgia facility for 2 years. Just like,
and now he's back here in Nashville watching his kid. Now he's back in Nashville. Like, hey, Kirby, can I take some time off this season to go watch my kid play?
Yeah, sure. Well, yeah, why not?
Anyway, I just think it's like the hot seat talk coming into the year. If you were to rank them, was Billy Napier, Sam Pittman. And then the next tier down would have been, Shane Beamer, Clark Lee. Like all of them are going to have overperformed except for Billy Napier, but all of them are coming back. Stoops, I predicted all summer he was going to retire. I'm probably wrong about that. But ultimately, there is a possibility that next year you're talking about hot seat. Like I think Brent Venables is more in this conversation than people realize next year. I think
next year. Yeah, they have to hire an OC.
If you got Venables, you got Brian Kelly, you got Hugh Freeze, you got Mark Stoops, you got there's a lot of talk. There's going to be a lot of talk around the hot seat next year, I think. But 16 out of 16 is almost unprecedented.
Yes, correct. I just don't believe it. Something will happen. I mean, like it always does.
Who? Like Josh Heupel goes to the Jets? Like, what are we talking about?
I mean, I was saying like Lane goes to the Jets or something. I mean, something stupid will. Yeah, absolutely.
What about okay? What about Lane Kiffin to Penn State? How about that?
Oh God, no.
Okay,
where's James going?
Nobody knows what James is going to do. James doesn't know what James is going to do.
I know what James is going to do. He's going to stay in Penn State because no one else wants to hire him for that amount of money with no national titles. And I'll tell you exactly what James is doing.
I was thinking NFL because NFL people don't watch college football games.
James Franklin to the Jets.
There we go. Can
we all just quietly make that happen?
That'd be awesome.
I just think the NFL. Just feel like you just.
There is nothing that's going to happen in a vacuum in this conference this year in the coaching ranks. It's going to have to be tied to something else. And USC's not moving on Lincoln Riley. It's like a $90 million buyout. That's not happening.
It's not 90, but it's a lot. Yeah.
So it's just not like there's not a thing out there.
Ooh,
give me one. Give me the thing that happens.
What if Lincoln goes and OCs in the NFL?
I don't. He's got too much ego for that.
Well, he's got too many losses right now.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't think it'll happen because his contract is so coach friendly at this point that he'll hold them up. But he is fast becoming.
What about a Dabo retirement?
Not fun. Oh, he actually carries through with all that BS that he talked. Like, you start paying him, I'm out.
I'm just saying that could open up some dominoes. And then maybe an SEC job.
Funny thing is this. I'm about to say this, and it's correct. But it is not going to sound correct. Clemson has won 2 national titles in the last decade. And they are an undervalued distressed property. Because their stupid head coach won't bring in talent at the level of which he could right now.
So what you're saying in this analogy is that Clemson is Twitter and that Ole Miss is Blue Sky is what I'm hearing.
I mean, we got to get out of here. I'll give it to you, but yeah,
fair enough. I think Twitter's a depreciated asset, and if Elon ever wanted, No, if I think he's a depreciate. I think Twitter's a depreciated asset. That if Elon ever sold it, the microblogging product is still very good, i.e., Clemson's football capabilities.
Mm-hmm.
It is
okay.
I think Twitter is a depreciated asset because Elon wanted it to be. That's it. Not because of any other. It's Dabo, right? Dabo self-sabotaged the Clemson program. Elon self-sabotaged Twitter. That's all I'm saying. That's my analogy. It works.
Dabo would have to have a Nick level of just like, this ain't the game. Like when we launched Who Killed College Football, that Saban quote was like a gift. And Dabo, you feel like, would say something bigger and dumber. So I don't know. I'm starting to buy into it, Braden.
We've been in the NIL business for forever. The name, image, and likeness of Jesus Christ.
Exalting his name, image, and likeness.
I'm just saying. And Elon and Dabo probably very politically aligned. So just throwing it out there. All right. Thank you, man. Give everybody where they can find you. Give us all that stuff.
At 38 Godfrey on some social media. I don't know. Social media is falling apart. But Washington Post, you can subscribe.
You're not 38 Godfrey on Blue Sky, are you?
I think I'm just my name. I just did it recently and let it sit for a while. Washington Post column every week. Split Zone Duo. Who Killed College Football, which is WKCFB.com. You subscribe there today. And I also make videos for Fox Media over at Secret Base.
ML Rose, if you are in Nashville, go get their burgers and their beers. It's a great place to watch games. Great happy hour drink specials on Saturday mornings as you get ready for your college football game of choice, and Sunday mornings if you like the NFL as well. Otherwise, rate, review, subscribe on the podcast app. Sign up for all those things Steven just told you about, and thumbs up on the YouTube page. We do appreciate you guys for hanging out. Otherwise, don't listen to Ward Manual. Deep breaths, everybody. We'll talk to you next week.